all of them, and you would sure be seeing some of your recommendations at the end of this academy. It's such a great opportunity to welcome in our midst or this session Aya Chebi, who is the African Youth Envoy, African Union Youth Envoy. I will not talk so much about her because I guess most of you know her and have seen most of the wonderful work that she's been doing to advocate and speak on behalf of young people and also bring their issues before policymakers around the world or especially in Africa. But before I would open the floor to begin the dialogue or interaction with her, I'm going to launch a video that explains some of the actions that her office has launched in recent years. Just to let you know that this is going to be an informal interactive section because Aya is one of us, and so it's not going to be too formal with the diplomatic protocols and all that. And she agrees with that, so we're going to take it really informal. So feel free to keep your questions coming during the dialogue. We're going to be having some chat with her. Tell her what you feel and what you would like to hear from her, either by typing in your questions or by raising your hand, as we are doing before, and we would be able to take your comments or questions.
So as part of our action plan, we try every time to organize intergenerational dialogues, wherever we go on missions or, separate programs at national, regional level. And today I was really, really excited about this intergenerational dialogue in South Sudan that we managed to do for about 3 hours. Young people really being bold and vocal and raising very critical questions and challenges they're facing and also challenging the leadership. And that's the idea of the dialogue.
Today has been quite helpful because it's been an eye-opener. Personally, for one, I almost lost hope on issues of peace. But now that from today's discussion, I picked that I myself as an individual or I myself as a South Sudanese, I do have a role I need to play as a youth and above all as a girl child.
Intergenerational dialogue is really important because it allows younger leaders to learn from their elders.
More young people are learning from the older generation and co-leading change.
And please try us because we want to co-lead with you.
This is your time. This more than ever, this is your time.
Prenez votre responsabilité. N'ayez pas peur pour le bien de la paix et de la sécurité de notre continent.
Et c'est ensemble que nous allons, relativement anciens et les jeunes, nous allons changer les choses sur le continent. For me, the intergenerational discussion should continue.
I am calling upon leaders to support intergenerational co-leadership.
Co-leadership leads to co-production of policies. And when you co-produce policies with the youth, who are the majority, then implementation is easier.
We know that if we engage more, we will have better results.
As one of our very first steps towards actually walking the talk.
So, the rest is up to you.
That is the way forward for the African women.
لدينا معدل أعمار القارة 25 ومعدل أعمار صناع القرار 66 سنة. فيعني الفارق كبير وذلك فارق في فهم المشكل وفارق في إيجاد الحل المشكل.
We recognize the struggle and without you, previous generation, we wouldn't exist. You paved the way for many of us, but we also have our own battle now and we need you to support us. The previous generation is trying to give us a torch to continue, but we don't want to inherit systems that we didn't co-design. We need to collaborate right now and co-lead, so when we are in that space, we can do a better job than you know.
I think after that wonderful and very powerful statement by Aya, we all in this room need to move with speed before we all lose our jobs, because it looks quite clear that the future is here.
Please keep shaking things up.
Let's shake things up.
Let's also shake things up.
Let's shake
Things up.
Let's shake things up. Yes. Let's shake things up.
That's great, ladies and gentlemen. Let's shake things up. So welcome again, Ayer. So good to have you here and to see the great work you've done and shaking up things that even the African leaders are agreeing that they need to be on their speed, otherwise they're gonna lose their job. That's wonderful to hear. Just before we go into the main conversation, I mean, you're quite young, occupying such an important position at the African level, advocating and speaking on behalf of young people at the table of decision. Would you maybe a little bit as a way of inspiration to other young people who are looking forward to how to start, where to start? Would you share with us a little bit how you got to this point? Why you in this position? How did you get here, or did you just appear from nowhere and became the African Union Youth Envoy? So tell us a little bit about your parcours, as we would say in French.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much. Before I start, I just want to say how excited I am to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here and for participating in this edition. I'm very proud of Hatem and the entire team. I remember last year it was just for one region. This year is the whole continent. This is how we scale up with some support and some push. So I'm really, proud of the whole team of Academy 2063 for putting this.
It is all thanks to you, dear Aya, because you have pushed us, you have challenged us, to just go there and kick some asses, as you have said during your presence here. So I would like really to thank you, Aya, for your great support, because you have been with us since the beginning, and it's too difficult to express my deepest gratitude to you, Aya. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Our duty. It's my pleasure. But also, I mean, all the young people who are gathered here, I know there are so many webinars happening, so many programs. We're all exhausted. It's been 8 months of this emotional, financial, mental draining, But for you all to show up and still continue to be resilient, continue to organize, this is what gives me inspiration to go back to the African Union and continue to challenge the leaders that young people are not waiting for you to do stuff. They are leading, they are at the forefront of driving this continent. So this is a proof of it. So on the Youth Envoy, I mean, I always say that I hope me taking up the assignment of the Youth Envoy would inspire young people to take up positions or occupy positions they deserve. Because I'm proud of the Youth Envoy process. It was not handpicked appointment. It was an open application. 700 young people from across the continent applied. Few of us got shortlisted and did interviews. I did an interview in front of a panel of 14. All the commissioners, all the regional economic communities. Until today, I meet people who say, I was in the panel who selected you. So it's I think, Africa is always pointed out to be the corrupt top-down kind of systems. But I think when we do create frameworks that are transparent, we need to acknowledge that. And this is, I think that this innovation of the Youth Envoy Office and the way it was selected, the whole process, could be a model for the world to follow. Because we see a lot of appointment globally and we don't know how these appointments happen. So I'm very proud to be in a position that is taken by merit. And it came from a decade of Pan-African activism. So I started with Tunisia's revolution in 2010, 2011. I then quickly went on to support youth movements across the continent. Right after Tunisia, Senegal, Y'en a marre, then Burkina, Le Ballet Citoyen, then Fees Must Fall, South Africa. It really like the first wave of change, what I call, swept the continent between 2010 and 2013, 2014. And it was just part of that continental mobilization. And then I kind of brought all the networks together in a platform called Africa Youth Movement, which I spent 6 years building because of the belief that when I traveled across the continent, like in 5 years, I've been to 30 countries and with no support, right? So I crash in my friends and comrades' places. I use some of the flights to go speak on social movement and state to organize. I spend Ramadan in Senegal, and just being the youthful self of me, just taking my backpack and going. I remember 2013, I went to Kenya with literally like a broken camera and to do documentary on post-election in 2013 compared to 2007, 2008 post-election violence. So it's just the drive of curiosity to find my African identity, my Pan-African identity, and to do something for the continent. And the more I travel, I realize we have the same issues. I've been listening a little bit to what young people were saying when you're asking them. It's the same. We hear it all the time. It's youth unemployment, it's corruption, it's bad governance, it's climate change, it's inequality everywhere on the continent. The young people have similar challenges with different context. So based on where you are, is it a conflict zone? Is it, rural, urban, and so on? But it's same. So when I was traveling, I had a question of, and when I discovered Pan-Africanism, a question of why is it that in the 60s, they managed to organize across borders. They didn't have Zoom and WhatsApp and none of the technology we have today. And in 1960, in 1 year, 10 African countries got independence. It's not because the colonizer suddenly decided to liberate all the countries. It's because people fought for liberation. And Bourguiba in Tunisia, the first president of Tunisia, has a street called Habib Bourguiba Avenue in Dhaka because he was the comrade of Senghor and they were in the struggle together. Same way Mandela was trained in Algeria to go back and fight apartheid. So there is a lot of common history. And I was wondering, why is that now we, as millennials, we are the most youthful population in human history. We're not organizing cross-border. We're not using all the technology, all the genius we have to do that, to mobilize. If we all decide to start a political party and vote for it, we will win. We have the voting power, we have the mobilization power, we have so many superpowers that sometimes we let others underestimate us, we let others put us down because you're young, but we don't realize the demographic power we have. So that was my drive for Pan-African activism, the belief, the conviction that, yes, we can save the continent as this generation because we're the youngest population, we're the majority, we have the demographic power, and we have the technology and tools to do that. We can organize transnationally across borders. But also we have this vision, it's Academy 2063. We talk a lot about 2063, but our vision for Pan-Africanism today needs to be redefined because they built the nation states in the 60s. They fought for liberation to, put up flags for each country. And it's difficult to still see, our country is still trying to fight for liberation and decolonization. But our definition of Pan-Africanism is to be borderless. We all are proud of where we come from as nations, but we want that borderless, that identity that is beyond our national borders. We want e-governance, we want e-commerce, we want e-citizenship, we want trade among each other, we go and study in each other universities, we want to serve in each other institutions. We are a generation that is very open to live in diversity. And I think we can use that. So now, like one of the issues, I also heard some people talk about conflict on the continent. One of the issues is really ethnicity and the division, along ethnic lines, how we say it. And I think we have the potential to end that with our generation. We should not inherit that and keep on identifying ourselves with the smaller identity of our ethnicity, our tribe, me, we have the potential to actually say, I'm African first and foremost. That's my, bigger identity. And I'm proud of all my other identities. So I'm a proud Maghrebian. I'm a proud Mediterranean. I have other identities. I'm a female, and so on and so forth. But first and foremost, if you ask me, I'm a Pan-African. And I would love to see this kind of academies train the next generation of Pan-Africanists, because somewhere between the 60s and now, we lost where Pan-Africanism is. A lot of young people don't even know our Pan-African history. But we have the opportunity today to not only talk about Agenda 2063, not only talk about the leaders of the 60s and we quote them and we know them, but to make our own Pan-Africanism. And that is to liberate ourselves from inequality and patriarchy and all of the ills that we face today. But we have to change how to do these things. So I went so far, but to go back to your question, the youth envoy position has been real opportunity and a challenge because I'm the first. And I think the opportunity I got is the 100% platform by the chairperson of the commission to be me, to say things how I want, not the. Yes, there are protocol and there are ways that you can communicate and learn to also make the leaders listen and speak their language too. But also we have to come to this space with our radical, youthful self and our own frustration, because I was in the streets, I was protesting, I got arrested, I got jailed for protesting. I was part of change in my country and in other countries. So I cannot sit very comfortably with a round table of old men telling me that they don't care about youthful population. I have to be frustrated. I have to show them, the anger of this generation, and that they have to be accountable to us, and that we should not pay the price for their mistakes and failures. And the only way, my philosophy and theory of change has been for this office, which you've seen in the video, is intergenerational co-leadership. Because I've been in both sides now. I've been in the streets where it's like the noisy activists, I'm against status quo, I'm against system, I don't care, all of you get out, we're gonna occupy, we're gonna change completely this system. So I've been that. And then when I went to the African Union, especially the first few months, I was observing, I was listening, I was trying to understand and navigate the bureaucracy and the intergovernmental space. And I realized that the only way for us to be outside and in the system and make it work is not this clash of generations. Even though we know, as I said in the video, the average age of African is 64, the average age of the population is 20. It's a huge gap, it's the largest in the world. But the only way, if we keep on with this tension and with this clash, we're not gonna go anywhere. Either the young people who go into the system would perpetuate the same system, so we're not gonna make any change on the system. People just change, but remain the same system. Or young people will remain outside in the street and social entrepreneurship and whatever we are trying to do, and then the politics will continue led by the same people. So for me, the only way for both to sit on a table is co-leadership, that don't pass the torch to me and tell me, when it's your time, you're gonna lead. No, let's have the youth advisors to presidential offices. Let's have quotas in parliament so young people occupy parliamentary seats. Let's have democratized national youth councils so young people navigate what government institutions are. Let's lower the age of youth running for office. Is insane to have 40 and 50 as the age for run for president or run for any public office. And Nigerians did it with not too young to run. Let's do waivers for electoral youth lists, because youth do not have the money to run campaigns and they're out of politics. So we put all of this in a report, actually maybe from my team, they can share the link, a report on greater inclusion of African youth in public service and governance, showing the case studies that it works. It worked in Rwanda, in public service, they have youth internships, paid internships. It worked in Nigeria. They lowered the age. Young people are more running for office. They are now driving change as well in Nigeria. It worked in Namibia. They have special advisor on youth. Now they have the youngest minister on the continent, and so on and so forth. So we're not gonna innovate or recreate the wheel. It's happening and it works. So why don't we do it at scale? Why don't all African countries, all heads of state, just listen, sit down in intergenerational conversation and understand that we cannot move forward if you don't co-lead side by side with young people. Don't invite youth for consultations.
Yeah, please go on. Sorry, I interrupted you. Yeah.
No worries. So don't invite youth later on for the closing ceremony. You have to have the youth in the meetings, co-chairing the meetings, in the spaces, co-leading and learning by doing, for us to move in a really peaceful and successful transition. Otherwise, the danger is that if all of them go out right now, all the old folks, they will leave office right now, and all of us occupy these offices. Our failure. We don't understand this bureaucratic system and how it works. It's just so conventional and so traditional. We need to co-lead with them so we can disrupt, so we can reform, so we can transform, so we can digitalize. And by the time the next generation come in, they will have more open space and more open minds like ourselves to engage them in an early stage. Sorry, I took too long.
No, it's perfect. I thank you so much, because I think you read my mind. I had a lot of questions around these issues that you have mentioned, and you really went wide, covering most of the things that I would normally have asked you to talk about. You mentioned quite a lot of things that are very important in terms of this transitioning that Africa needs to go through. You've talked about the need for values and ethic, redefining. I mean, talking also about the process for selecting the African Youth Envoy office, which is the issue of transparency, which is something that is very important today in the global stage, but most importantly for us, Africa. You also talked about identity. You talked about redefining our vision, which is something I would also want to hear a little bit more from you, because like we've been mentioning like these challenges, we've been acting, advocating at so many levels. You have said it, when you move around, you see that the challenges are similar, even if the contexts are a little bit different. And this conversation didn't just start today about how we can rebuild Africa that is people oriented, that looks at developing their own youthful population. You probably have your own vision, which is captured in your plan as a youth envoy, and to carry out this kind of, to promote this kind of position in Africa. Would you want to share a little bit more in terms of vision, in terms of plan, how you've been driving this initiative? Because we need to move beyond this conversation, but to actually begin to see the actions at country level. I don't know how many countries are subscribing to the plan that you had for the youth empowerment, and how it's going on at the country level. Perhaps it would be good to hear about that. And folks, sorry, you have the floor. As I said, it's an informal conversation, so feel free to jump in by raising your hands or putting your question in the chat. I see there's a lot of appreciation for your work in the chat. People are in love with you and the work that you do. They are inspired by you. So keep it coming. Keep doing what you're doing. I think people are feeling you quite a lot. So please talk to us a little bit more about this process and how you're going about it.
So you're talking about sorry, there's
yeah. Yes, please. Aya.
Yeah. So you're asking about the right?
Yeah, I lost you for a moment. I don't know if it's I lost you for a moment. I don't know if it's the internet on my side or your side. Can you hear me
now?
Yes, now it's okay. Yeah.
So just to go back to basics, the first of youth,
one of the most progressive documents in the world, adopted in 2006. It even inspired other global documents like Resolution 2250, which young people ironically know more now than their own African Youth Charter. But even the charter, inspired those kind of global documents. So I think it's our responsibility as young people first to know, did my country ratify this charter or not? 39 countries ratified, so 16 did not. And for us to say that Africa as a continent cares about the youth agenda, we have to be able to say all the 55 countries ratified this charter because they know they have to move forward with the youth agenda. Now, why the charter is important? Because the charter outlines all youth rights, youth peace and security, health, education, young women, everything we dream of as young people is in there. And it even outlines how it could be done. So putting up youth development funds, setting up youth national councils, and so on and so forth. Now, to help or support the African Youth Charter implementation, every 10 years we have a 10-year implementation plan, just like the Agenda 2063. I mean, many young people criticize Agenda 2063, like, we're thinking 50 years, but we want change now. Why are you putting an agenda for 50 years? But the Agenda 2063 has...
I agree with those young people.
But what young people don't know is that Agenda 2063 has 10-year implementation plan with indicators, with very much detailed of what does that mean. Agenda 2063 has 14 flagship projects. One of them is silencing the guns. One of them is African free trade area. One of them is the e-network. One of them is the airline network. So it's very concrete agenda. But just when we hear Agenda 2063, we think, oh my God, it's like the next 40 years, I'm not gonna live, even live there. And yet we talk about it. So we need to really look at our agendas, what is attached to it. The same way the Continental Framework on Youth, Peace and Security was adopted in June this year. I'm not sure if so many young people know about it, but finally we have our own Continental Framework on Youth, Peace and Security. And attached to that, the AU Peace and Security Council didn't just adopt a framework, it adopted a 10-year implementation plan. So this is to say, the same way African Youth Charter, we have APAYE, the plan for youth empowerment, which is the 10-year from 2019 to 2023. So I think the issue is not policies at all. We have one of the most progressive policies. Actually, when I came into the African Union, I was really impressed. We have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the only charter in the world that recognizes people's rights, not only human rights. We have the Charter on Public Service and Administration. I mean, a list goes on. So the issue on the continent is implementation. It's moving from aspiration to implementation, is moving from these frameworks into national action plans. So it's not enough to have a continental agreement, which I think we also are ahead of so many other continents. Africa is the only continent that is projecting its vision to 50 years ahead. So we have to be proud of these kind of progressive continental frameworks. We have gender strategy, we have Maputo Protocol. It's all progressive. It all recognizes our rights. Now, how do we take that to implementation? It's about youth-led accountability, holding governments accountable and telling them, you're mandated, you signed up to this, you ratified this, so you have to deliver on this. So we need that kind of movement of youth-led accountability. And one of the ways my office tried to do that is put in place the African Youth Charter Hustlers, which we're announcing next week. So for every country, we have selected 2 young people, a young man and young women, for the 55 member states, so 110 youth, who will be the hustlers. Young people on the continent hustle all the time. We hustle for jobs, we hustle for space, we hustle. Now we're gonna hustle for the charter because we want the charter to be implemented and we want the charter to be reported. And how did you implement it? What progress have you reached? So I think that's one, the youth-led accountability. 2, it's, the 2063, it's not the current leaders' agenda, like the future. It's not their future they're talking about. It's our future at stake. So while we hold them accountable 50% of our time, the other 50%, we need to drive that agenda. We need to step into the front line of that agenda, own it and drive it.
and design how would that look like. So if we say National Youth Council, it's the young people's responsibility to make sure the Youth Council is democratized, is a space that is inclusive of all young people in their countries. These polls keep popping up. Make sure you answer the poll question. So we need, so these kind of frameworks, the youth fund, we need to make sure if we set up in our country a youth fund, the young people need to drive the accountability mechanism for it. So I think there is a duty and accountability to the government, to the leaders, to the program setup, but there is also leadership of young people to make sure these happen, because if we don't care about our own programs and frameworks and what is set up for us, sometimes not with us, just set up top down, who's gonna care? And then after a few, months or weeks, we hear about corruption, we hear about the money didn't go to the community, didn't go to the grassroots, didn't go to the youth-led organization. But if we fought and made sure that we have 2, 3, 4 young people in the steering committee, in the implementation committee, and whatever the structure is, then we make sure that we're not just leaving these programs to be implemented in isolation. We have to integrate it also in our work as young people. So I want to encourage everyone to really own these agendas, own the Agenda 2063, own the African Youth Charter, own the Continental Framework on Youth, Peace and Security, own APAE, and hold government accountable while driving within your work, within your organization, the implementation process.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Aya. This is great. You especially the aspect of accountability. There was a question earlier in the chat that talks about when you're launching the hustlers, but you already talked about it.
Yes.
I think this is already happening around the world. In Africa, we see a lot of protests that is happening because young people are demanding accountability. Even though we're not seeing the ripple effect, we're not having the good impact at the end of the day, because some of them are being clamped down because they're asking for change. They are being put in prison like you were at some point. But I think it's good for young people to know that when you ask for a positive change, there's repercussion, but this should not be a reason to give up. Even though these clampdowns are happening in Nigeria, in other countries that I know and I've heard or read in the news, but I think let's keep the battle going, and it's about our future, and we cannot leave it to them, even if they clamp down on us. And to always take the conversation beyond just protesting on the street to actual policy dialogue. Yes, it's no longer the policy because we do have them, but how do we put them into action? So when the protests are happening, your voices are being heard by the media, but you need to actually find the entry point to enter into the dialogue at the policy table to demand concrete change. Since we are not so much on time, I would open the floor for those who would like to.
Protest, can I?
Yes, please go on. Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, we continue to stand in solidarity with the young people protesting across the continent, in Nigeria, in Namibia, in Guinea, in Uganda, in Zimbabwe, in Cameroon. It's really a long list, and it breaks my heart, because it's not a long list of like, oh, youth are now appointed, to leadership, but it's a long list of youth, rights being violated, youth experiencing and subjected to police brutality. So I think when you work on human rights, or when you work in this kind of context, your instrument of the African Union is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. You can hold your government accountable on these, because the charter is very clear. You cannot use violence against civilians. That's one. Two, yes, we need to move from protest to organizing. From protest to organizing, because protests usually, and especially this leaderless movements we have, we had the first wave 2010, 2011, second wave 2019, 2020. It started with Sudan, Algeria last year. It continues now with a lot of countries. But youth protests usually is faceless. You don't know who are the leaders, the mobilizers, and so on. But then we need to move to organize, it starts as spontaneous, organic, and so on. Then we need to organize ourselves into media collectives. So we say our own narrative. We don't allow the media to, manipulate the narrative of what young people want. So you need to organize into advocacy group in the parliament, advocacy groups within ministries. So you need to basically, civil society in general, you need to basically take the demands of the protest and build the momentum on it to go on the decision-making table and make the impact. And I think that's what I would like to continue to support young people to do. I was in Namibia just 2 weeks ago for this purpose, to stand in solidarity with them, but also to kind of have that solidarity conversation. I brought 2 activists from the Fees Must Fall movement to sit down together and see the big picture. So they have gone through a similar, wave. What does that mean? How did they move from protesting or winning? Even if you protest and you win, okay, the government goes out and say, okay, you asked for state of emergency, here is a state of emergency. Okay, that's winning, like ticking a box, but then you go back to the movement and you're not building with them. You have people who leave the movement, people divided within the movement, people don't understand what's the common vision of the movement. So you need to build within in order to organize and identify in the movement, okay, I am good at policy, so I'm gonna be in this space. Rally behind that young person who want to be, who want to run for office or who want to be in that space. I am good at communication, I want to be in media. Support and rally behind that young person to reach the space of the media so they can tell the stories of the movement. So I think if we can manage to do this at a country by country level with the solidarity of other young people on the continent, then we can be able to build the Pan-African movement, youth movement that we have to build. My comrades, we have to build that Pan-African movement. There is no way we get out of this crisis without it. And I think as much as it's depressing to see so much, happening on the continent and the violations and people losing their lives, whether with COVID, whether with violence, whether violence of all sorts, even urban violence, drug lords, warlords. At the same time, I think there is a great drive and opportunity and energy that young people can put together in solidarity with each other. So we need to care about what's happening with my, young person in Ghana or with the young person in Zimbabwe. We need to care because if they win the battle to democracy, if they democratize, if they move the youth agenda forward, that makes the case for you to do it. If your neighbor did better, then you can go on to government and be like, it's possible. We come from the same kind of conditions. We have experienced the same history. Why is this country progressing and we're not? So we need to see my liberation as your liberation. That's Ubuntu. We need to see my struggle as your struggle. So, and I was happy to see that with ANSARS. I was happy to see how many young people have been in solidarity with Nigerian movement. Let's do that with every youth movement on the continent. Let's stand in solidarity because the more the masses, the voices are united in one Pan-African unity, the more we can put pressure on these governments to deliver for us.
Thank you, Aya. I am because you are Ubuntu, so we're together in this. Sorry, folks, we are running out of time. It's such a wonderful conversation, and I would like us to keep it going, but it has to end at some point. Of course, keep your comments and your questions coming, and probably we'll get it to Aya's team, and you could have more response if there's something specific from our office that you want to hear. But I would take 1 or 2 questions, 30-second max, if you would be very precise with your questions or comment. I call on Haja first, and then maybe Fatumata Jabi, you can follow up. If you keep your question 30 seconds, we will be able to take the 2 of you.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep it at a second.
Yes.
So my name is Hajar. I'm from Morocco, and thank you so much, Aya, for just a beautiful and motivational talk that you've given us. I just want to know, based on your experience working with this older generation who actually controls our governments, do you think that there is any other alternative to create that change and create that Pan-Africanism without necessarily including violence as young people? Because you've given an example of the Tunisian revolution and SARS and all of that, and we know that they have created change, but we have also lost many young lives that could have been beneficial. So I would just like to know, based on your experience, if you believe that in order to create change, we need to stir trouble, or if there could be other alternatives that young people could use to.
Thank you, Haja. So Aya, if you don't mind, maybe we take the two more questions together and you can wrap up with the response. Is that fine by you? Okay, great. So Fatumata, we will take you now, and after that, Dabo Aisha. Yeah. So 30-second max, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Aya, for that inspiring presentation. My name is Fatmata Jabi. I am from the Gambia. My question is relating to the history of Africa. We've seen pre-colonial times how Africa was a successful and civilized continent, and after the colonization, everything just is, everything is just messed up. Well, how do you think we can learn from our history dating from the pre-colonial time, and then making sure that we learn some of the lessons to building Africa and bringing it back to its glory? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Fatmata. And then last question from Dabo Aisha. Yes.
Hello everyone. Hi, I'm so happy I'm hearing from you today. I'm so happy. My name is Aisha Dabo from Guinea, Republic of Guinea. My question goes, is it possible we all African have one voice, just like the way Nigerian SARS protests, everyone came together? Let's look at the common problem we African countries have. If it's a protest, if it's a documentation, if it's a reform, we need it. Africa needs to come as, we're already a continent, but we really need to focus on the implementation of making our results being oriented, because it's very important. It's very sad to see that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Dabo. Yeah, I see more than 15 hands up. I would like to take all of you, but it's impossible at the moment. But as you know, the academy continues and the conversations are all interwoven, interconnected. So feel free to bring your questions up in chat during any of the following conversations that we happen. And if it's specific to Aya's office, do send them and we would ensure it gets to her team. Aya, so please go on to respond to the three questions and maybe give like final remarks or thoughts on where you think we should go from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for your questions. I want to ask Amina to drop our email so that people can continue to engage, and also feel free to do that through office of Hatem's team. I was just also going through the chat. I saw someone comment on 10-year implementation plan for first flagship program is going to be up to 2063. I mean, it's 10-year implementation plan, not to 2063, it's to 2019 to 2023, so it's 10 years. But also, Simon, you're a member of the Youth Advisory Council. You should be the one answering these kind of questions to the young people. You represent East Africa. So the three questions, the first is on protests and how young people can make change. So I think it really depends on the strategy of the youth in that country and the context of that country on how you make change. In some countries, you have internet censorship. You can't do that online. And in some countries, you have violations when you go to protest. In some countries, you have freedom to do everything. And so sometimes protests wouldn't be a tool to put pressure. And I would take, for example, Namibia's example. When young people went to protest for 2 weeks, they were invited by the president to have some representatives to sit down and tackle the issue. And then the president told them, I'm on your team. Let's fight gender-based violence. Let's implement all these policies. Let's fix the justice system. So I think it really depends on the context you live in and what kind of tools you can use to make change in your country. But again, I want to go back to intergenerational co-leadership. I think
what I see is that we're in a continuous cycle of frustration. So we start in 2011, now we're celebrating 10-year anniversary of the revolution. Every year when the media calls me, it's like, okay, 1 year, 2 years anniversary, what changed? And I'm frustrated, but also other countries who have gone through these social movements. So I think there is something in there as a youth movement we're not getting right, which for me is intergenerational co-leadership, is how you move from the protest and the youth movement to actually now make decisions in the government, to actually be outside the system and in the system, and both youth who are in both spaces collaborating and supporting each other. I think that's where we can really make change, when we can really make a difference. So unless we are co-leading with the old guys, unless we disrupt the spaces of the old guys, and we use our innovation, we use our technology to really transform and accelerate transformation, we're going to end up with a similar cycle. And I'm afraid, what really frustrates me and frightens me, that if we don't do it in a mass scale, if we don't do it in not one youth envoy and one special advisor and one young minister, we cannot do exceptions. We have to do it in mass. 50% of the public service should be youth. If we don't do it, then we end up with these very exception people who are there and who either will fight and resist, or will be co-opted, or will become part of the system, and it's not your ally anymore. So I think we need to do more on bringing youth in masses, the same way we do it in the streets, in masses in leadership. Now we need in masses 50% in the parliament. We need them in all these spaces. The other question also was on the youth movement. Someone asked can we be a one voice as African youth, to lead that kind of change, and based on history and all of that. We can only if we are a feminist movement. Because why does the women movement succeed? Why do we have so many, women quotas in our governments? Why do we have so many women going up to leadership compared to the youth movement? It's because the women movement is continuous. Yes, it has its generational as well challenges between the young women and women of other generation. But in the youth movement, if we are part of one movement and we're not a feminist movement, and the next day we're fighting on the street together, and the next day you're harassing me, or we fought on the street together, we won the revolution, you go and become the minister and you forget about all the women who were on the front line, then that's not a unified movement. So until we become a feminist movement, and by feminist I mean you believe that me and you have equal chances and equal opportunities in life. That's what I mean. It doesn't have any, in Africa, everyone has their own connotation of what feminism is. That's for another conversation. But what I mean by a feminist movement is that, yes, the youth movement is not succeeding because you're excluding young women from it. And if you welcome young women to it at the beginning, when we all win, we find ourselves out of the occasion, the equation at the last. So I think in the youth movement, we need to have very gender conversations within our movement. So we are empowering young women as well to lead or co-lead in the movement. That's one. And the second thing is that we need to be able in the youth space to go beyond unhealthy competition. It really saddens me to see young people who are in leadership and other young people are trying to undermine them or trying to compete with them or trying to discredit them. And these unhealthy competition is dividing us. It's not a win for the movement. So whether you agree with that young person leadership or not, as long as you have the same values, as long as you are part of the same mission, everyone has their own style of leadership, that's fine. But we need to continue to rally behind each other. We need to continue to support each other. We need to stand in solidarity with each other. And that's what women movement does. Women, actually in the women movement, they identify the women who want to be in leadership, who aspire to be in leadership, and they campaign for them. You don't know about that because it's behind the scene, it's organizing, but they do. They travel to different countries to campaign for them. They support each other. So, and I'm talking about the other generation. That's what I'm learning from also our mothers and how they struggled in their movement. So I think in the youth movement, the more we see young people stand up for other young people support young people, and not see as, competition or jealousy or whatever it is, the sentiment. Just put all of that behind us. What is the goal? Let's focus on our mission. The goal is to move Africa's development forward. The goal is to secure jobs for us. The goal is to live with dignity. The goal is to have livelihoods. The goal is to get out of poverty. So if we keep focused on our collective mission, those divisions, those competition, those unhealthy things become details. So I would really, my final message here is, let us rise above these unhealthy competition. Let's rise above ethnic, national, religious differences. Let's rise above all what we have inherited as something to divide us, and let's unite. Because if we put our Pan-African vision first, if we put our Pan-African identity first, then with any young person on the continent, with our brothers and sisters, we can do magic. We can do magic. I feel home on the continent, any corner of the continent. I traveled across. I feel home everywhere, whether when I speak a little bit of Arabic and Kiswahili, or whether because we share, the faith with another country and have Ramadan, whether, we speak whatever language. It's just, I feel home. The culture, the food, the beats. When you go on TikTok now, everything is Afro beats. So it's like, and even though I come from North Africa, and of course, in the first couple of years, I struggled to kind of rally young people around my vision of Pan-Africanism as a North African and make them understand that we have indigenous people of North Africa. We have Amazigh, we have Shilha, we have Gnawa, we have Tuareg, we have a very connected history to the continent. So the more we educate ourselves, no one will do it for us. Our education system is screwed.
Thank you, Aya. Yeah. I see Aya is really passionate already and diving so deep into the conversation. But
so,
yeah, this is really great, Aya.
To conclude, I just want to thank again Hatem and his team for the amazing platform. This is my most joyful moment. I was to come for 20 minutes, but I pushed everything else because we need this conversation, we need organizing, we need to come together, we need to have honest conversations, and I love doing that with us as young people. So thank you all, and I hope you have great sessions moving ahead today and the next couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aya. Shukran, shukran, shukran. This is my only Arabic word that I know for that. Yeah, merci beaucoup.